steps as I sat on the cold metal bench, clutching my backpack and staring at the departure board. Flight 447 to Los Angeles had already taken off 2 hours ago. Mom's flight. The flight she was supposed to take me on. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message, a call, anything. The last text I'd received from her was at 6 a.m. "Running late, sweetie. Meet us at Gate B 12 by 8:30. Love you." It was now 2 p.m. My name is Alex Chen, and at 15, I thought I understood betrayal. I thought I knew what it felt like when your best friend talked behind your back, or when your crush liked someone else. But sitting in that airport, watching families reunite and couples embrace, I learned that betrayal has depths I never imagined. The worst part wasn't even being abandoned. It was the realization that crept over me slowly, like ice water filling my lungs. Mom hadn't forgotten. She hadn't gotten into an accident or missed her alarm. She had made a choice to leave me behind. The security guard who found me 3 hours later was kind enough. Officer Martinez had seen plenty of unaccompanied minors, but something about my situation made her pause. When I explained that my mother was supposed to take me to California for our family vacation, her expression grew concerned. "Let me call your mom for you, honey," she said, pulling out her radio. That's when I showed her the Instagram post. Mom had uploaded it just an hour ago. A picture of her and Richard clinking champagne glasses in what looked like first-class seats. The caption read, "Finally, just me and my amazing husband heading to our dream honeymoon in Malibu. Sometimes you need to prioritize your happiness and new beginnings." New chapter. Justice, Chuck Malibu bound. Officer Martinez's face went through several expressions as she read it. Confusion, then understanding, then something that looked a lot like anger. "Honey," she said quietly, "where's your father?" That was a complicated question. Dad lived in Portland with his new family, twin toddlers and a wife, who made it clear I wasn't particularly welcome during my court-mandated visits. Mom had been my primary guardian since the divorce when I was 12, or at least she had been. The next 6 hours were a blur of phone calls, social workers, and waiting rooms. Mom's phone went straight to voicemail. Richard's number was blocked. The police couldn't do much beyond filing a report for child abandonment. A crime, they informed me, though prosecution was unlikely given the circumstances. I ended up at my Aunt Sarah's house that night. Mom's sister had driven 4 hours from Colorado Springs to pick me up, her face tight with barely contained fury. "I always knew Linda was selfish," Aunt Sarah muttered as we drove through the darkness. "But this? This is a new low, even for her." That first night in my aunt's spare room, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg Mom to come back or explain herself. I was going to make her regret what she'd done. But I was 15 and naive, and revenge is a dish that requires patience I didn't yet possess. My first attempt was pathetic. I created fake social media accounts and left angry comments on Mom's vacation photos. How could you abandon your child? And what kind of mother leaves her kid at the airport? But she just blocked the accounts and kept posting pictures of her and Richard at fancy restaurants, on the beach, at a spa. Each photo felt like another slap. My second attempt was more elaborate, but equally ineffective. I called her work and told her boss that she was using sick leave to go on vacation. But Mom had legitimately taken vacation time, and all I accomplished was making her assistant uncomfortable. Week after week, I plotted and schemed, but nothing stuck. Mom seemed untouchable in her new life, protected by Richard's money and her own shameless ability to justify anything she did. Then, 3 months later, I overheard a phone call that changed everything. Aunt Sarah was talking to my Uncle Mike, her voice low but urgent. I was supposed to be doing homework, but the words trust fund and Alex's inheritance made me freeze at the top of the stairs. She can't just ignore it forever, Mike. The money is specifically for Alex's education and support. If Linda isn't providing that support... I know. But challenging it legally could take years, and it might not be worth the fight. $20,000 a year until Alex turns 18 isn't worth fighting for? Plus the college fund? My heart stopped. Trust fund? College fund? I crept closer to the stairs. Look, Uncle Mike continued, I'm not saying Linda is stealing the money. Maybe she's putting it aside for Alex. Maybe... Mike. Aunt Sarah's voice was sharp. I've been taking care of Alex for 3 months. I haven't seen a dime from Linda. Not for food, clothes, school supplies, nothing. Where do you think that money is going? That night, I couldn't sleep. I researched trust funds online until my eyes burned. I learned about fiduciary duty, about how trustees are legally obligated to use trust money for the beneficiary's benefit. I learned about penalties for misappropriation of trust funds. Most importantly, I learned that everything was documented. Bank records, expenditure reports, financial statements. It took me 2 weeks to work up the courage to call the law firm that had set up the trust fund after my grandfather's death. They couldn't give me detailed information over the phone, but they confirmed what I suspected. The trust existed, I was the beneficiary, and my mother was the trustee. They also told me something crucial. As the beneficiary, I had the right to request an accounting of how the funds were being used. I requested that accounting. What I received 2 weeks later was a manila envelope that changed my life. Pages and pages of bank statements, transaction records, and expenditure reports. For 3 years, my mother had been receiving $20,000 annually from my trust fund, ostensibly for my care and education. In the past year alone, I could trace where the money had gone: expensive dinners with Richard, a jewelry purchase for $4,000, spa treatments, and most damning of all, a payment of $8,000 to Malibu Dream Vacations, dated just 2 weeks before she abandoned me at the airport. She had used my inheritance money to fund the very vacation she'd chosen over me. But the evidence went deeper. I found records going back to when she'd first started dating Richard 2 years ago. Designer handbags, weekend trips, a payment to a luxury car dealership, thousands and thousands of dollars that should have gone to my food, clothing, education, and future. Instead, funding her new lifestyle and attempts to impress her wealthy boyfriend. For the first time since that day at the airport, I smiled. Armed with the financial records, I made an appointment with a different lawyer, one who specialized in trust fund disputes and fiduciary misconduct. Margaret Winters was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who listened to my story with growing interest. "This is very clear-cut," she said, reviewing the documents. "Your mother has been systematically breaching her fiduciary duty for years. The penalties could be significant." "What kind of penalties?" "She could be required to repay every misappropriated dollar with interest. She could be removed as trustee and face criminal charges for theft. And given the egregious nature of the abandonment..." She looked up at me. "We might also have grounds for a civil suit: emotional distress, abandonment, breach of parental duty." "How much are we talking about?" Margaret did some quick calculations. "Based on these records, she's misappropriated approximately $50,000 over 3 years. With penalties and interest, she could owe the trust fund upwards of $75,000. The civil suit could add significantly more. $75,000. Suddenly, Mom's new life didn't seem so untouchable. "There's something else," Margaret continued. "Trust fund theft is a felony in Colorado if the amount exceeds $20,000. Your mother could face prison time. I felt a dark satisfaction spreading through my chest. What do we need to do? The legal process moved faster than I expected. Margaret filed a petition with the court to remove Mom as trustee and demand a full accounting. She also reported the theft to the district attorney's office and initiated a civil lawsuit on my behalf. The first Mom knew about any of it was when the sheriff's deputy served her papers at her workplace. According to the process server's report, she'd gone white as a sheet and asked to speak to her manager. That night, my phone rang for the first time in 4 months. Mom's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Alex? Her voice was shaky, higher than usual. Alex, honey, I got some papers today, and I think there's been some kind of mistake. No mistake, I said calmly. What? Honey, listen, I know you're upset about the vacation thing, but this is serious. These lawyers are saying I stole money from you, which is crazy. That money was for taking care of you, and I did take care of you. By abandoning me at the airport? Silence. Alex, sweetheart, I can explain that. There was a mix-up with the tickets, and Richard thought you were on a later flight. And by the time we realized... Mom, you posted on Instagram about finally having alone time with your husband. You paid for that vacation with my trust fund money. $8,000 of my inheritance. Another silence, longer this time. How do you... She stopped herself. Alex, you don't understand how expensive it is to raise a child. The money from the trust wasn't enough to cover everything. I had to use my own money sometimes too, so when I occasionally used some of the trust money for other things, it was just balancing out. $50,000, Mom, over 3 years. Dinners, jewelry, cars, vacations. While I wore the same 3 pairs of jeans for 2 years because you said money was tight. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Alex, please. You're my daughter. We can work this out. I'll pay back whatever I owe, okay? Just call off the lawyers. This could ruin my career, my marriage. Like you ruined my life when you left me at that airport? I didn't mean for that to happen. It was a mistake, a miscommunication. The only mistake, I said, was you thinking you could get away with it. I hung up. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, court dates, and revelations. The more Margaret dug into Mom's finances, the worse it got. She'd been living far beyond her means for years, using my trust fund as her personal bank account to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Richard, it turned out, wasn't as wealthy as he'd pretended. He was drowning in debt, and Mom's access to my trust fund had been propping up their entire relationship. When Margaret's investigation revealed that some of the trust money had also gone toward paying Richard's credit card bills, even he turned on her. He filed for divorce within 6 weeks of the lawsuit being filed. The local news picked up the story. Local woman charged with stealing from daughter's trust fund after airport abandonment. Mom's face was on the evening news, looking haggard and defeated as she left the courthouse. The comments on the news station's Facebook page were brutal. Her co-workers saw it, her friends saw it, everyone saw what kind of person she really was. But the real victory came 6 months after I'd first requested those trust fund records. The criminal case resolved first. Mom pled guilty to felony theft to avoid a trial and received 2 years, probation, community service, and was ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties. The civil case settled out of court for an additional $30,000 in damages. All told, Mom had to pay back nearly $110,000. Money she didn't have. She lost her house. She lost her car. She declared bankruptcy, but trust fund theft isn't dischargeable in bankruptcy court. The debt would follow her for the rest of her life. She also lost something else, her parental rights. As part of the settlement, she agreed to terminate her rights and responsibilities as my guardian. I was free. The day the final papers were signed, I sat in Margaret's office feeling empty. I'd expected triumph, satisfaction, closure. Instead, I felt hollow. Revenge isn't as satisfying as people think it will be, Margaret said gently, as if reading my mind. Justice is important, but it doesn't undo the hurt. She was right. Mom was ruined, but I was still the kid who'd been abandoned at an airport. I still had trust issues and abandonment fears. I still woke up sometimes in a panic, thinking I'd been left behind again. But there was something else, something I hadn't expected. I was stronger. I'd faced the worst thing I could imagine, and not only survived it, but fought back. I'd learned that I didn't need Mom's validation or love to be okay. I didn't need her at all. 2 years later, I'm 17 now, living with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike, who adopted me after everything was settled. The trust fund, restored and properly managed, will pay for my college education. I'm planning to study law. Mom tried to reach out once, about a year ago. A long letter full of apologies and explanations, asking for another chance. I read it once and threw it away. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I learned something important in those months of legal battles and court proceedings. Revenge and justice aren't the same thing. Revenge is personal, emotional, often destructive to everyone involved. Justice is about setting things right, protecting yourself and others, making sure consequences match actions. I didn't destroy Mom's life out of spite or anger, though I won't pretend those emotions weren't there. I held her accountable for what she'd done. I protected my future and my inheritance. I made sure she couldn't do the same thing to another child. And in the process, I discovered something unexpected. I didn't need her anymore. The scared, abandoned 15-year-old sitting in that airport was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who wouldn't let anyone take advantage of her again.